everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Move to Heal podcast. My name is Allie Hirschman.
I'm Colleen Delaney.
I'm Ethan Hirschman.
And today we have the honor of being joined by Jessica Dean, who is one of our board members. She is also a registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor, and she leads our nutritional program, which is guiding participants to achieve a balanced diet, incorporating mindfulness practices, and developing a healthy relationship with food. And I am so excited to pick your brain a little bit and kind of get to know the program a bit more for our listeners, and just kind of hear a little bit more about you and how you got started. So I would love for you to just share what kind of was the driving force for you to get into this field? Yeah. And how did that all start?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. And
so glad you're here.
Yeah.
On board. So thank you. So I would say that my journey to nutrition was kind of like, I don't know, a bumpy road and a little bit wavy, especially getting to the place where I am now with intuitive eating. Diet culture is so loud that I feel like we get sucked into that and it kind of hijacks our brain and brainwashes us into thinking that nutrition needs to be a certain way. And if we're healthy, we're eating in this way. And if we're unhealthy, we're eating in another way. And so I went through a whole journey of trying different diets, over-exercising, under-eating, and realizing none of that really worked. If anything, it just made me more of an unhealthy person. And the crazy thing, too, is during this whole time where I was over-exercising, under-eating, I was a dietitian, right? So I had all the information and the knowledge on what to do and how to eat to support fitness or just being a healthy individual. But diet culture was so strong that I was kind of, again, hijacked into thinking something different. So it wasn't really until I was working at Yale, actually, and one of my coworkers came in and she was like, "Have you ever read this book, Health at Every Size, and have you read Intuitive Eating?" And I was like, "What is that?" And this was literally like 10 years ago.
Wow.
And of course, so she's like, "You have to read it." Okay. And so if anybody tells me I have to read anything, I am. And I read the Intuitive Eating book, and it was like light bulb after light bulb after light bulb. And I'm like, wow, this is so me. Like, I had no idea I was dieting. Like, if you had asked me, before, if I followed any sort of diet, I'd say no. Like, I don't diet, right? I just eat healthy. But after reading the Intuitive Eating book, I was like, wow, I have literally been dieting my whole life and not even knowing that I was dieting. And it was really under disguise in more of like orthorexia, or that super healthy or super focus on healthy eating. Where you like eliminate, food groups, or you don't eat carbs, or maybe the order you eat food, like it can be so, what do I want to say? Like in disguise that you don't recognize that you're doing.
And what was that term you just used?
Orthorexia.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
wow.
Look it up. It's a good one.
Huh.
And I find that most people, so side tangent, most people who are really into fitness and exercise, fall into that orthorexic category, because we want to be healthy in all ways. We're taking care of our bodies, we're exercising, and then we prioritize maybe protein over carbohydrates, or we make sure we're eating like mostly plants and very little, I don't know.
Geez, where do I sign up? Oh my God.
So it is something that I think a lot of people, especially in the fitness industry, end up having, is orthorexia. And
is it talked about? Like, I've really never even heard that.
Yeah, no, not really.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Really. Okay.
So it's like the easy way to describe it is like the hyper focus on on healthy eating. Right. It's like so in the Intuitive Eating book, that was kind of like the light bulb moment for me. Like, oh my gosh, I have been doing this my whole life, right? My mom, the reason why I got into nutrition is my mom, I always say, like, she's the pioneer of nutrition. She was like wheat germ and homemade peanut butter, and we only ate fruit and vegetables. And, she was so focused on nutrition that it was just my natural progression to go into it. So literally, when I say I've been like healthy eating my whole life, I have been healthy eating my whole life, whether by choice or not. And so the book really was kind of that, the thing that made me go in a different direction of like, okay, now I'm aware. And once you're aware, you can't be unaware, right? It's like, once you know, you can't unknow. And so I knew that my behaviors weren't healthy. Like, and I don't mean like eating healthy, just like my body was not healthy. It was so stressed. And I started to do more education for myself on what intuitive eating is. How do I become a certified intuitive eating counselor? Because if I fell into this trap, then I'm sure there's so many other women that are in the trap or fell into the trap unknowingly.
Yeah. And when you walk into a gym, it's so easy to fall into that trap.
Totally.
Because you just buy into the whole fitness and diet culture. And with social media,
well, I was going to say,
it
social media
really warps everybody into thinking a certain way. And I think diet, which I hate that word, but like the lifestyle of eating is different for everybody. And like for me, because I have Crohn's and colitis and Lyme disease, I have to eat gluten, dairy, sugar free. But I do it in a way that works for me so it doesn't turn into an eating disorder. You know, I don't measure out my food. I eat until I'm full. I eat whole nutritious foods that are keeping me healthy.
Yeah. I think that's the important thing too, is realizing that it's different for everyone. And when we're doing paleo or keto or macro counting, we're really not listening to what our body needs, which is the premise of intuitive eating. We're really basing our decisions off something external, right? Like, what are my points, or what are my macros, or what does the calculator say? And with intuitive eating, it really is bringing it back into you and your body. Like, what does your body need, or what does it do best with or without? And that's like Colleen's way of eating, which is probably different than yours or mine or even yours. So intuitive eating really helps teach the patient or the person what is right for you, and pushing out the noise of society or social media or external expectations, so that you can really turn back into yourself.
So Jess, a question that comes to mind is, what, after all these years of sort of eating healthy and eat, you know, the diets and all that stuff, and then reading this book, a lot of people would have said, "Oh, okay, this is another opinion," and just put the book aside and kept going. What was sort of that turning point for you? Like, what made you think, "Wow, I got to go down this path as opposed to stay on the one I was on"?
I love this question because there's patients that I work with that have read the intuitive eating book like 5 years ago, and it went right over their head, and it wasn't anything that resonated with them, so they put it down. And same with other dietitians, like have read it and were like, no, this is not for me. But I think it was the right timing, right? Like, I was at this place where I was like not feeling great, trying to manipulate all macros or whatever it is, and it was the right time for me. When I read it, it just felt right. And I think just the recognition too of like, oh my gosh, I've been dieting.
Yeah, and you were probably fed up with that lifestyle. It's draining.
But never even knew I was dieting, right? Like bringing my salads and chicken and all, the things that looked healthy.
Right.
But I had realized I had so many rules that I was following that I didn't realize I was following. Right. I remember at the beginning of this journey, so I really wanted to come up with like, okay, what would be one of my big goals where if I was able to accomplish this one thing, I would feel like I've made it, right? Like I've kind of walked myself out of diet culture and into being an intuitive eater. And what my first goal was to be, and I think I've probably said this to people before, I really wanted to be able to order an ice cream cone with my kids. Like I would never, my kids are like almost in their 20s, they're all of them. And for how many years, I never would get an ice cream cone.
And not feel guilty about it.
Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I'll just take a lick. And so that was a rule that I had, was like, I cannot have ice cream with my kids or it's bad or whatever. And so being able to do that now is huge. Right? It sounds so silly and so simple, but my gosh, like all moms should be able to have an ice cream cone with their kids and not feel guilty about it.
Right.
Right.
It sounds like
100%.
freeing, that type of mentality. And
Let's
also,
go get blizzards. I'm like,
I know.
And having that good relationship with food and not feeling guilty about it.
Yeah.
And, I noticed with a lot of like working in, with the nutrition and Move Teal clients, a lot of people were saying that they just struggled doing every diet and feeling guilty every time they ate something bad and just like binging and then starving and,
Yes.
you know, and I love how you've created the Move to Heal nutrition program and the respect that let's have a healthy relationship with food. And is that something you hear a lot in like in the weekly meetings, like that people struggle with having that relationship with food and have it be
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that comes from the external, right? Like we have society or all the million diets that are out there have categorized foods into good and bad. And again, we've kind of like learned everything we know about nutrition, right, is learned. And so we have to kind of unlearn that way of thinking that this is good and this is bad. And we can have ice cream cones with our kids and things like that and not feel guilty about them. But it's an unlearning process that food doesn't have to be categorized as good or bad. We can have food. Food is not just for nourishment. It's also for enjoyment and for it can be a social thing. It can be an emotional thing. And there's so many reasons why we eat that don't always have to do with fueling our body. But that concept is really scary for so many people. So it's a journey, the way I describe it to our Move to Heal participants or my patients that I work with is we're taking a journey away from something that is comfortable and going to something that's uncomfortable, which is mind-blowing, right? To listen to your body is so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But in the world of nutrition, we're so comfortable listening to somebody else and having somebody else tell us what to do. That listening to our own body seems like unheard of.
Yeah.
So-
I think just because I want to ask about like the good and the bad, like labeling foods good versus bad, and thinking about how the impact like adults and parents have on kids, you know, like if kids doing something bad is really negative, you know, and there's consequences. And it's even, I feel like a lot of, at least for me, a lot of my relationship with food was just this learned behavior from watching my parents and like, you know, what do they do or how do they talk about themselves and their bodies and how do they talk about food? So is that something that you focus on or talk about in terms of like what it looks like healing the relationship as adults, especially as it has its impact with kids?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I can just use myself as an example with when I healed my relationship with food, it healed my kids' relationship with food too.
That's really powerful.
And as a mom, all the decisions I make, I think about how is this going to impact my children. And I hadn't realized that my relationship with food was really impacting my kids.
Yeah.
And one of the first, with intuitive eating, we bring in foods that we never allowed. That's right. Give ourselves full permission to enjoy all foods. And so I was doing that for myself, but I wanted to do that for my children too. And one of the first things that I brought into the house was chocolate milk. Because, you know, I was a healthy eater. We didn't drink chocolate milk. It was white milk and we didn't do added sugar. And so I had all these rules. So I was like, okay, so I'm doing it for me. I'm going to do it for my kids. The chocolate milk lasted for like a day. Right?
Yeah.
Because my kids were like, oh my gosh, chocolate milk. And, you know, in the intuitive eating book, it's like constant exposure to these foods. It takes away like the glory.
Yeah.
Like, you want to take them off the pedestal so they don't feel so special, right? That binge
Yeah.
restrict.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And so I just kept buying chocolate milk. I'm like, oh, I hope this works. You
Yeah.
know, like my kids are going to just become like chocolate milk addicts and want that at all meals and snacks. And now chocolate milk stays in our fridge for like a week, right?
Yeah,
Because that
that's
constant
amazing.
exposure to
Yeah.
it that now it's going to be there. They're comfortable with
Right,
it. It's not
right.
going away.
Right.
They don't feel that need to drink the whole thing in
Yeah.
a day. But I would not have been able to do that for them if I hadn't done that for myself
Right.
first. And now that, you know, now they're comfortable with having that food that when they get older, it won't be
Right.
a thing, right?
For people who are listening, like, and someone like me who has autoimmune issues that have to eat gluten, dairy, sugar-free, what is your advice for someone who wants to intuitive eat but has to have restrictions?
Yeah. So I have a patient who was just diagnosed with a nickel allergy. So if you try to find foods that are like low nickel, it's like impossible, right? They're
Wow.
out there.
Is nickel in every?
Yeah.
it's in everything.
It comes from the ground. So
Okay.
if anything is grown from the ground,
Grown from the
right,
ground.
it's going to have nickel. Been working on disordered eating and intuitive eating, and then the patient gets this diagnosis, and it's like, she's like, what do I do? I've come so far, and now I have to like go back, right? And it's our bodies have such a memory, right? So this diagnosis triggered her back into like that restrictive mindset, which kicked up a whole lot of feelings of like, here we go again, right? And so it was walking her through this, this diagnosis and helping reframe it in a way that's going to feel a little bit better and not so restrictive in dieting. It's definitely going to be hard to figure it out, but when we can frame it as a self-care, like I'm following all the things like sugar-free,
eating
gluten,
to nourish your body, fuel your body, and change that framework in your mind.
It's not I can't. It's like I'm choosing not to.
Yeah.
Because you totally can, right?
Yeah.
We all have self-will. So you could totally eat gluten if you wanted to. You may not feel well, but you could do it. And so when we switch the way we think about it and we make it more of a self-care choice, like a decision, you have full permission to eat that food, but I'm deciding to eat gluten-free, it switches something in the brain. It takes it from feeling like a restriction to more of a self-care choice.
Yeah.
And it's
That's,
sometimes
I
it's just
love that.
reframing it the way we think about
That's so good for people to hear too, because I remember when I got diagnosed and they were like, well, you're going to have to cut out this, this, and this. I was like, my life is over.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like when, like someone who's in recovery from addiction, when they can't do something, they're like, this life is going to be so boring. And, but the fact that I get to eat such nutritious food that makes me feel good, when you start to feel good inside, it makes you want to keep going and encourage that type of eating.
Yeah. And so it's with people who have a history of dieting, any sort of thought or perceived restriction, right? Like I can't eat gluten, right? Like that's someone who's dieted in the past, that kicks up that memory of restriction. Yeah. And it's almost subconscious, right? So we have to stay in the consciousness of, nope, this is a choice that I'm consciously making to not eat gluten
and keep it a lifestyle.
Feel good in my body. It's not coming from a I can't restrictive place. It's coming from I can, but I'm choosing to do it different.
Yeah, and keeping it a lifestyle and not just like a hot and cold thing. You do something for 6 months and you fall off the wagon. Everyone knows, and that's something that I learned through working with nutrition Move to Heal clients was I've done every diet and I can do it for a certain amount of time and then I fall off and I gain weight, lose weight. And it's like, how can we make this a lifestyle and feel good about what we're doing and maintain?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. If you do the all or nothing, right, which is diet culture, it's like I'm all in or I'm all out, then it's not sustainable. And so I always encourage people to look at it as like, we're looking for the gray, right? We're not black or white. We're not on or off. We're like in the middle, right? So we want to find a way that we can eat and nourish our body that's sustainable forever. So if it's 30 days or 45 or 75 or whatever it is, that's not forever. So let's rethink it and maybe work on finding something that's going to be sustainable. And it probably will look different than what you're thinking it will look like.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to be black and white.
So, Jess, getting back to your story, right? You got this book, you read it, and you were working at Yale.
Yes.
What happened next?
Well, of course, I had implemented intuitive eating wherever I could at Yale, right? So I was working in a clinic, and they had asked me to develop a nutrition program. So of course, I threw intuitive eating all over the place. But it was one of those things where, once you see and know something, you can't. And so I really, at that point, knew where I was working in Yale wasn't really aligning with how I wanted to practice anymore. So I did what I could at the clinic. But at that point, also realized I need to open a practice. Like, if there's so many women and men out there who would benefit from this, that I needed to offer this service to people. And so I opened up my private practice on the side, of course, where I was working. And then it's grown. And we have a lot of men and women coming in, and children, even parents calling for their children, to work with us. And I have to say, it's all, when I talk to people on the phone, it's almost refreshing. Yeah. And a lot of them will be like, wow, this is such a refreshing way to think about food, because it's always
takes the pressure off.
So rigid, and they've worked with other dietitians or whatever, and then they've felt like it was, really strict and rigid. And so when they get to me finally, I explain how we work, it's almost like I can feel their shoulders relax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, finally. Yeah.
And I'm sure you're your business is so successful because everything comes from your personal experience.
Yeah.
Personal experience is the best lessons and the best teachings, in my opinion.
I agree. I don't think I would be as good at what I do if I didn't have the life experience to back it up.
Yeah.
Well, you can relate with your
Yeah.
clients.
And also when
that
somebody has
sort
a
of thing,
problem, you're like, well, when I dealt with this is what I did. What is the most rewarding parts of your job?
Oh, I like all parts of my job. It's so great. But I have to say when, when I get a new patient and they're really struggling with this idea of intuitive eating, they want it so bad, but they don't want to go back to dieting. But it's almost like they have, 1 foot in each, like 1 foot in diet culture, 1 foot in intuitive eating. And it's really scary, to take that leap to just trust me. But when they do, and we work through all the challenges and then say, this is not a quick thing. Like becoming an intuitive eater and leaving diet culture behind takes time, right? Like at least 6 months, maybe a year. So it's not like a quick fix. But when those patients hang with me and then, a year goes by and they show up at session and they're like, this is what I did. I had cake and I didn't eat the whole thing. I listened to my body. I had a couple bites and realized it wasn't good. And, when they come to me so excited and they see all the tools that we've been practicing kind of come to fruition and it's working in the way that they're conscious and they're aware of what their body's telling them. It's not so much effort, because in the beginning it is a lot of like conscious effort. So when it becomes more like flow for them and they're excited and they feel it and they see it, that's literally the best.
Yeah.
I love that. It's amazing.
What's been your experience with working with Move to Heal clients and the 16-week program?
So I love those clients. They're just great. They always come with questions and open mind. I would say one of my biggest, I don't know if it was a hesitation or if it was maybe concern. I'm not sure if those are the right words to use. But I knew I would get a lot of people that had an idea of what nutrition would be. Or like, you hear about a nutrition program and you automatically have ideas of like, it's going to be macro counting or it's going to be like a list of foods and I knew we weren't doing any of that. And so I was a little bit like, I don't know how this is going to go. Like people are going to show up and they're going to expect one thing and get something different. But I know the difference is going to be better for them in the long run. But what I have found is everybody has embraced this idea of being intuitive or mindful with the approach and almost like grateful. And the important thing is each week we give different topics and to think about, and they're able to take what they want, leave the rest, or circle back around. We had another person that came back for a second time through just to get like more nuggets of information. So it's different in the way that they're not being shoved, nothing's being shoved down their throat to make them feel like this is successful. You're doing this, then you're successful at the program. Because then that would put people into like, if they weren't able to do it, they might feel guilty or shameful and stop coming. So we really want to empower them all. So giving them useful tips and tools that they can take away at each session has been our goal. And I feel like we're doing a good job at that.
Oh, yeah.
So. Who's a good candidate? Like someone listening in that has access to this Move to Heal program. What would you consider a good candidate for the program?
I feel like everybody would benefit from the program, whether you think you have poor nutrition or not, or you are clueless about nutrition or not. I think all people would benefit from just hearing the information we provide. Like I had said in the beginning, I didn't even realize I was a dieter. It was like this undercover thing that I didn't even realize. Something like this would have been so beneficial for me to hear, like how to listen to my body or trust it. So I feel like all people could benefit from popping into the program or just looking at the topics. And if something sounds good, just coming and listening. And again, you just take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah.
We do Q&As too. So if there's people out there that have specific nutrition questions that aren't covered in our topics, they are more than welcome to come and ask questions there too.
Yeah.
So.
That's
People, because I go to all the meetings and I get to talk to a lot of the Move to Heal clients, and they said this has been life-changing for them because they're getting to the root cause of why they have certain eating patterns that they don't like.
Yeah.
And I feel like it almost takes the pressure off of them because they come in and they're like, okay, this is going to be like, this is not going to be a quick fix. You're not going to get instant gratification. But like, you know, if you're there for 16 weeks to do the program, that's a while, and it gives you enough time to really like give it a chance. And then pairing it with Move to Heal meetings, Move to Heal workouts, you know, it kind of is all encompassing and so good for people.
Yeah, it's great. And I think, just having people come to the nutrition program, going to the Move to Heal meetings and the workouts is just, they're getting, I feel like sometimes I refer to it as like a hug. Like we all have our arms around our participants and just helping them in all ways, whether it's therapy, nutrition, working out, meetings. So it's just one little piece to the puzzle. And
the community getting to see, I could be in a Brantford meeting, Allie could be in the Rhode Island one, and then we come and do this nutrition program and we get to like see the different communities within Move to Heal, which is really cool.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah,
That's true.
I love that.
I haven't thought about it. That is cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
One thing that I just thought of when you said that was the idea of consistency too, which is really important. So if you're in Brantford and you're in Rhode Island, you're getting the same nutrition information, which I think is important. So it's, again, less confusion of, if you meet and you're like, my dietitian said this.
Right.
This is the Move to Heal way.
Yeah. That could be confusing.
No, I think that
this is a really nice way to keep it like the same and present the information in a way that
so we could scale this as well, because we want to take this.
Yeah, that's when that was one of the really great benefits of having you come join us. And I think the fact that you do this intuitive eating program versus, okay, let's do your macros, or let's go paleo or whatever, or keto or whatever, really is perfect for the other components of Move to Heal, with the workouts and the group recovery meetings and the therapy, because we're dealing with people that struggle in different areas of their lives, and a lot of them are eating disorders. Which clearly a diet is like,
you can't even say
totally
that word.
The wrong thing, right?
It's that even saying that word is triggering. That's why it's like in meetings, it's staying away from certain words, because people that struggle with eating disorders it's super triggering, and people are super sensitive to it. And you want to create that safe space. So if you're talking about diets and stuff like that, that can turn somebody off like immediately.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things with intuitive eating too, and the way that we do the program, it decreases the feeling of shame around the way we eat. And I feel like a lot of times people struggle with if they're not doing something right, especially our population may be more sensitive to trying to do the right thing, or so I don't want to create any more pain or confusion or suffering for somebody. So when we can take the shame out of eating and really kind of like make it neutral, I think that's beneficial.
Of the 16-week program, what are some of your favorite ones to teach?
Oh gosh, there's one. I think I get the most response when I talk about like permission to eat all foods, because that's really scary for people. And the first idea that people usually have is, I'm telling them to just go wild and eat, whatever they want, whenever they want it. And that's really scary for them. But it's actually what we want to do. It's kind of like the chocolate milk of like, I want you to introduce these foods in so that they don't feel scary to you. You're not going to just start eating like a wild person, maybe for like a couple days. But once you bring the foods in and you're used to having them, then they don't have that power over you anymore.
Totally. Wow. Yeah, I think, and one of the things that my doctor told me in the beginning was like romanticizing your whole experience. So when you sit down doing meditative breaths to calm down your nervous system and get your digestive juices flowing, and also like something as simple as chewing your food.
Yeah.
Like, so it's easier digested. And these are all things that I'm sure you talk about in your program. And how something that little can be so beneficial.
Yeah. And it's not something that you would think of on your own, right? Like, oh, I should bring these foods in because then they won't, they won't have so much control over me, or I won't feel scared of them. Like,
Right. I feel like
I don't think I
we
would ever
fear
thought of
so
that.
much food, like we've been told it's bad or it's this or that. So I can imagine that's such a freeing feeling for people to hear, like, hey, like you actually don't need to fear these foods. You can have more, of a different mindset around that, which I really
sure.
like.
I mean, you look at the eating disorders. I mean, it's I'm eating too much, or I'm eating too little, or I'm not eating the right thing, or
Well, and it's like nowadays there's chemicals in this, chemicals in that, and like you can't even drink your water. It becomes so overwhelming to the point where you don't know where to turn and who to trust.
And there's so many different pieces of information out there, especially on social media. My gosh,
Yeah.
I think, and I wanted to ask you, those that don't have access to this program, what are some things that maybe they can start to implement? Like I started unfollowing accounts on Instagram that when I looked at them, they just didn't make me feel good, and that was really freeing for me because it was like, okay, I'm not like comparing or I'm not feeling bad about myself. But are there certain things that people who are really resonating with this conversation can start to implement today that have been helpful that you've seen?
I think your idea is great, right? Unfollowing different accounts that maybe make you feel like less than. Again, like you probably can feel those things within your body if you're scrolling on social media and Instagram and something pops up and you're like, oh, right? Like that should be the trigger. Like maybe this isn't good for me and my nervous system, and unfollowing it. So I've had a lot of patients unfollow, like if they were Weight Watcher followers, right? They would unfollow that or anything that would make them feel not good about what they were doing. I also encourage patients to really be conscious of what their thoughts are. So are there places during the day where their thoughts are, ooh, I shouldn't have carbohydrates at lunch because I had them at breakfast, or wow, that was so bad that I had chips with my sandwich. I shouldn't have done that. So noticing where we're kind of beating ourselves up or kind of holding ourselves to like maybe an unrealistic standard, and just being aware of them.
Yeah.
And that like my patients will come back and we'll talk about those things and we'll figure out like, are they true or not true, to hold on to those thoughts, or how do we think about them differently? But first we have to be aware of them.
Yeah.
So just being aware of like how many times during the day are we like thinking about food, or are we being critical about the way we're eating, so that we can work.
And what was the name of that book that you read? Because I feel like that could be a great book for our listeners to read.
So Intuitive Eating is the book. Health at Every Size was one of the other books. And I always have a third book that I truly love, which was called Body Kindness. And so
it's a great
that's
title.
like another
Yeah.
whole podcast probably of like, how do we find peace with our bodies?
Yeah.
So Intuitive Eating really was the food, and then Body Kindness really helped me feel more comfortable with my body, which I think both of those things together is just like a winning combination.
Giving your body the love that it needs. I always tell people that are struggling, your body's doing the best that it can. And you need to like feed it with that love that it deserves, because
Sometimes we're so mean to our body, even though like it does everything for us, and like we totally take that for granted, and we say like, we look in the mirror and we say like the meanest things. And I'll say like maybe 3 years ago, I eliminated the word fat out of my vocabulary.
I hate that word.
I hate that word. But I used to be like, oh my God, I'm so fat, or I'm this, or I'm that. And now when other people say it, I have my boundary where I'm like, nope, like I'm not, and it feels so icky to me.
when
like,
people
it's
say in
horrible.
meetings, it makes me
I
cringe.
know. It makes me sad. You know what I mean? Because we beat ourselves up so much, and our bodies do so much for
and
us.
also getting involved with a gym that represents positivity and everybody matters. And what is your advice on workouts and how to handle that part of the journey?
Yeah. So I want to say something about the word fat. And I feel like that word has been hijacked by diet culture to be something that means meanness. Right?
Yeah.
Like you say fat and it's internalized as like a mean comment. I've never been in a larger body, so I don't know what it feels like. So I definitely am coming from a place of thin privilege. But I have a lot of patients who we work on adjusting the way we feel about that word fat, and like how do we make it neutral, just like like red or blue eyes. Like it's just a descriptive word, and we don't need to attach any sort of negativeness to it. And sometimes it's even like reclaiming the word as theirs, right?
Yeah.
So that's easier said than done for sure.
No, I love that though.
The word.
Like it's like nothing's off limits, right? And just changing that framework in your brain.
Like the word fat too, like for me, it's always lose the fat. Like that's all you see. Fat loss, lose fat in 10 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's so toxic.
I'm sure
that
makes you nuts when you see on the cover of a magazine of like health, and it's like how to lose 10 pounds in 10 days.
And not to mention a photoshopped cover of a magazine. It's just like, it's so
our society just ruins us.
It's
like
terrible.
everything that social media.
That's why I got off social media, was because the comparison game and then the warp like ideas that it puts in your brain.
Yeah.
But I want to get back to that question of workouts and being sure that you are, I mean, I know at Move to Heal gyms, we're very particular with who we bring on because we want that safe space for everybody. Yeah. But for people that don't have access to Move to Heal, what is your advice on workouts and how to pick a gym?
So, I mean, if you asked me this 10 years ago, it would have been different. But I always say intuitive eating leads to intuitive living. And so listening to what your body needs in that moment and not trying to make yourself do something because you think it's healthy or good for you. So whether it's a walk, in the beginning of my journey, I would wake up in the morning and I would say talking to my body like it's a person, like, what do you feel like doing today? And some days it was going to the gym. Some days it was walking. Some days it was stretching and doing yoga. And it, again, just bringing everything back into yourself and trying to figure out what is right for me. So if someone was wanting to start a fitness journey, I would start with walking and kind of checking in, like, how is this feeling? Does this feel good? Do I want to do more? Do I want to do less? Do I like it? So our fitness choice, and sometimes I'll say, instead of exercise, I'll say movement, because that includes so much more. Like blowing leaves can be movement. Yeah. Playing football with your kid can be movement. But we don't always think of those things as exercise, but they totally are.
They 100% are.
So I would look at like what types of movements feel good to me, or where am I already doing movement during the day that maybe I can do more of, because we want it to be enjoyable too.
Yeah.
So if you asked me to run, I would hate that, but I'll walk.
Yeah.
So finding enjoyable movement.
I love that.
And it sounds like, the intuitive eating and intuitive thinking, like developing this trust that your body knows what you need, and like actually being able to listen to it without this need to control the thoughts, but really like understanding, like sometimes I'm sore from a workout and I should be able to say, you know what, like I'm just going to go for a walk, because going for a walk is not like less than doing a workout, but again, society makes you feel that way. Like, what? You're lazy, you're this, you're that, you're not disciplined. It's like, but I'm so sore,
Yeah.
So.
And the soreness is telling you that you need to rest. Right.
And also old belief patterns that I used to have, where if I'm not dying in a workout, I'm not getting a good workout. And now I've totally shifted my mindset, and my hour walks are just as important as my high intensity workouts were.
Right.
And I think it evolves too, and allowing the evolving process to happen. And it's okay to try something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And doing whatever feels good.
Right.
If we think about the stress that we put our bodies under, whether it's trying to follow a strict nutrition plan or following a strict fitness plan, it creates that internal stress, inflammation in our body, which isn't helpful. And I see it all the time with especially women going through menopause, and their bodies are changing. It's like, I'm going to do more. I'm going to be more strict. And they're just perpetuating the problem. And sometimes it's less is better. So we want to think about, how do we reduce the internal stress on our body? And so if our bodies are sore or tired and we go and we push it to do a workout, we're just increasing the internal stress on our body, which isn't going to be helpful in any sort of way. So listening to the body and trusting, like, okay, it's sore. It means I need to walk or rest or stretch, not drive myself into the ground.
And also the simplicity. People think it has to be complicated for it to work, and it doesn't. Right. And the overtraining is not where it's at. I've been there, and it is not a good place to be mentally or physically. You go into adrenal fatigue, you know, your body actually goes backwards. And then to repair that damage, you have to go to intuitive eating type of things. And so I love that this is part of our program because I wholeheartedly believe in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's great.
I just wanted to say thank you, Jess. You know, not only for joining us on that dietitian pathway for Move to Heal, which is now consistent, and it's in an area that I think is really, really complementary to all the other things that we do. But for you being on our board and
creating
all
that
the,
safe space
and all the time that you give us, it's just we're super grateful.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jess.
you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
It's been
Thank you.
amazing. Well, Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys want to learn more about our nutrition program, check us out at www.movetohealct.org, and you can always find us on Instagram at movetoheal.ct. Thank you guys for listening. Subscribe, like, comment, all the things, and we'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.